Hey, welcome to Black Coal Woodworking. My name's Matt. Today I'm making a platter out of a 2x4. First thing I did is cut it to length. It's about 10.5 inches per piece. I'm using 3 pieces. I marked them out because I am going to run them through the jointer just for the mating surfaces so that they will have a nice tight joint, because the last thing I want is any cracks at all. So why did I use a 2x4? Well, I'm really new to wood turning. The stuff's really stable, easily accessible, and I didn't want to test out this stuff on really expensive wood. Once the glue up was done, I marked out the center of the piece just so I could drill a pilot hole to get this thing onto a screw chuck on the lathe. I used the center punch to help make sure that when I put the drill bit through this thing, it's actually going to line up nicely. Then I took the corners off at the bandsaw just because it's easier to turn the thing on a lathe that's not completely square, and with those corners it actually doesn't fit on my lathe. I needed to remove them. At the lathe, the first thing I did was take my 1/2-inch bowl gouge and bring this thing down to round, just by making a series of passes. I also realized that if I go from the top of the platter, any kind of chip out I get would be at the bottom, which I would cut away anyway. So that's what you're seeing me do here. Is on the left, that's going to be the top of the platter, and the big face that you see there, that's going to be the bottom. When I start the bottom of the platter, the first thing I do is just get it flat. And that's because I don't stick it through a planer or anything like that. I just use the lathe to kind of roughly flatten it. And then I start marking out where I want the main pieces. So that's where I want my rim and the foot. So they're kind of tied together. This will be the foot because it is the bottom. So I'm just trying to figure out where I want my 4-jaw chuck to seat into. So I'm going to make a recess there in the middle of the platter and then mark out my foot here. And that's what that line is for. When you mark out a line for the foot using a caliper like this, you gotta be really careful not to get the right side of that caliper to touch the wood. If you do, that thing is probably going to fold in half or something. I don't know, but I don't want to find out, so I didn't do it. At this point now, I'm starting to create the foot by creating a recess in the middle of the bowl. That way it's just the foot that touches the table or the counter, and it just sits more flat that way. There's no chance that it's going to have the middle stick down too far and cause it to rock. I'm leaving that center circle there just because I know that's where I want to put the recess, and I'm going to use my parting tool to dig that recess in here. And then I'll also use a spindle gouge. I think it's a 1/2 inch or something small of a spindle gouge to help clean that up in a bit. So here's where I'm using the spindle gouge to point backwards into that little recess because I want to make it a dovetail. I'm also using the spindle gouge to deepen that hole just a bit. It's really only about 2 millimeters deep, which is not very deep if you think about it, but it does work. Then, just because it's fun, and because I like to disguise the hole a little bit, I add some lines for decoration. Alright, time to work on that rim. The way I do it is to start at the back and just kind of work my way toward the front using some lines that I have as references to make sure that I don't go too far. So the first thing is to just take a big angled cut toward the top part of the rim, and I'm marking out where I need to stop. And I stop before I hit the face of the other side because I want to flatten that face before I go too far also. So here I'm using kind of the side wing of the bowl gouge to deepen kind of the foot, or kind of give it a bit of a profile like you see here. Those shavings sure look a lot like angel hair noodles. When you get that, you know you've got a sharp tool. If you're not getting that, you probably need to sharpen the tool, or you might have the wrong angle. When I make a cut like this, I'm almost never looking at the tool where I'm cutting. I'm always looking at the horizon to watch that line move along the wood. It's a lot easier to see what you're doing that way. So here you can see that I've got it pretty smooth. It's actually shiny smooth, but I've got a flat spot on the top that I still need to work out, so I'm going to keep working on this thing a little bit more. The recess for the forward jaw chuck does have some sawdust, so I need to get rid of that before I flip this thing around. Otherwise, it probably won't clamp very well, and I risk losing it and having it fly off the lathe, which I obviously don't want to have. So I flipped the platter around now in the forward jaw chuck, and first thing I'm going to do is to flatten the front face. That way I know exactly what I'm dealing with, and I know how much material I have left. So I don't need to take away all the material from the center at this point. It really doesn't matter yet. I did get a lot of really good shavings, so I'm happy about that. It means that the top of the platter is very smooth right now, although not entirely flat because sanding would help with that. But I still got to get rid of that flat spot, so we'll take out one more pass here. So now I'm going to mark out the rim of the platter, and I'm trying to kind of make it even. I've got a blank spot on the left. There'll be a dark part in the middle that I'm coloring in, and then on the right, that next line is where I'm going to start the actual bowl. And to make that dark part kind of dark, I'm going to burn it. But I will just say that before you burn anything like this, get rid of all the shavings that are anywhere near you, especially underneath your lathe, because you don't want to have something drop in there and start a fire. For the burning process itself, I'm using as little flame as possible, and I'm really just toasting that area. I can actually still see the pencil marks through what I've done, but the way I'm kind of burning the wood here, it still gives me enough contrast and I get the result I wanted. So to clean up this whole burning thing, I'm going to use a diamond point tool and aim at the pencil lines that I can still faintly see, and that will create a nice kind of contrast and will sharpen the lines that I'm looking for. It'll also cause the darkened area to show up as a raised area, which is actually kind of nice. You can feel it. It's a bit of an interesting feature to the plate or platter, and as you can see, it cleans up nicely. So when I cleaned up that outer rim, I only went so far toward the middle of the platter because that's where I'm going to start cutting the dished part of it out. I don't know why, but hollowing something out with a bowl gouge is a ton of fun, especially when you get amazing shavings like that. So I'm starting with the outermost part of that dished out bowl part of this platter, because I want to establish that depth, and I also want to make sure that it goes kind of almost vertically deep into the bowl, or directly into the bowl. And in order to do that, I do have to take out some of the middle portion of the bowl, but that middle portion there is providing stability to the rest of it, so I want to leave that there as long as I can. It just really depends on how much room that gouge needs. I do stop fairly frequently to make sure that I'm getting the right thickness of this thing. Really don't want to go too thin. Alright, so I finally got the thickness I want, and now it's time to take out that center. This part's a ton of fun. Time for another thickness check, make some more adjustments. I actually ended up getting thinner than I wanted, but still an acceptable thickness. And then that really means that I'll have to fix the rest with some sandpaper. And that's what I should have done, but instead I tried using my spindle gouge and it didn't quite go so well. I tried to come back in and I got a catch. I ended up gouging my bottom of the platter, so I used a different kind of scraper. It's kind of a round scraper, and then I used that to fix the kind of mistakes I made, at least to a point. It wasn't nearly as smooth as I wanted anymore, but I could fix that with sandpaper too. The thickness ended up being pretty good. I actually like it, but just how I got there wasn't ideal. So for this sanding, I found that working my way up through the grits actually works really well. So I probably started with 60 and then 120 and kind of went up to about 320. And after that, I'm trying a new finish for me, which is 2 parts boiled linseed, no, 2 parts walnut oil, 2 parts shellac, and 1 part beeswax. So the shellac gives it a shine, and it's actually quite sticky on the wood. I think it may help it stick better. We're gonna find out. And I will probably have to put another video out on that because I want to give this platter some time and test it and just see how that kind of finish works. And yeah, the walnut oil is just to help kind of penetrate into the wood. And what I try and do is burnish this plate with paper towel while I do this. But I can't really do that burnt rim with everything else, so I kind of do that on a separate part of that paper towel. Otherwise, I would take some of that char and put it all over the platter. So as you can tell, it does shine up nicely, and I really like it. This is the bottom of the platter again. I did the same kind of thing here, except I couldn't burnish it because now I couldn't flip it around. I actually had to wait for my walnut oil to come in. So my plan here was to just kind of rub it into the wood and then use a heat gun to get the wax and everything to melt in. So what I get with that is the surface of the wood is penetrated by that heat gun, but I don't get that burnish that would cause it to shine. So we'll see how that works too. So there you have it. If you liked the video, please consider subscribing and leave me a comment down below. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next time.